Hello everyone, welcome to 3ddesignacademy.com. In this lesson, we'll continue with part 2 of the Mercedes-Benz E-Class Coupe project. Okay, so in the previous lesson, we spent some time setting up the project file with all the canvases and the cube for the sizing. So in this one, we are actually go ahead and start modeling. So like all cars, I prefer to start with the wheel flat because basically that even in a professional setting, let's say you're working for XYZ Motors, your OEM, you almost always start with the wheelbase because that sets up a lot of things where all the parts are going to go. That determines the size of the vehicle, the dimensions, and how much passenger space you're going to have, the width of the car, etc., etc. So it is one of the most important aspects of the car, and especially for the modeling too, because almost all the important surfaces connect to it. So I'm going to start with that. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is just grab an edit point curve. It's going to be a degree 2, and I'm just going to center it somewhere around the wheel like this. I'm just going to move the pivot here, and I'm just going to make sure that it's about center. It doesn't have to be like perfect, but it should be very close. I'm just going to move it like this, and that is going to serve as the basis for the wheel flat. And I'm also going to create a curve that just points down so that we can create a surface or rail for the wheel flat also. Okay, so I'm going to start with the front one. So I'm going to just turn the rear canvas off, and let's just go to the front view like this, and let's just push it out like that so that it is mimicking the shape. And let me just pull it out so that it's right at the end so that the sizing is correct. I'm just going to use the stretch tool over here to push it in like this. And you probably need at least some crown, so I'm going to give it a little bit. And I'm just going to use the stretch tool to make sure that the shape is following the canvas like this. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is all wheel flats have a little bit of shape to them. So let's give it some shape over here. Actually, it looks like this one. Well, actually, you know what? I think it looks correct. Okay, never mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull the CV out like this, and I'm just going to push this one in. And it looks like this one is going, as it goes forward, it has a little bit of lean, or as it goes a little bit inward. So I'm just going to make sure that I am giving that feature from the top view. So let's go ahead and do that, and maybe a little bit more. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a rail which will serve as a base surface for the wheel flat itself. So I'm just going to do a rail like this, and I usually for this one like to use parallel sweep mode so that everything's nice and clean. Just going to go to side view, and now let's create a curve for the wheel flat itself. Looks like this is a little bit too close to the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, let's see, I'm going to just extend this one by, actually not by 1 mil. I'm going to extend this a little bit more by, let's say 5 mils over here. And actually let's do more than that. Okay, so I'm going to say 15 mils over here, and I'm going to extend 15 mils. You can just type it in like that. So that's a little bit bigger. Okay, so now I'm just going to strike a curve from the center of the curve down so that we know where the center of the wheel is. I think that's pretty good, but I might shift it just a little bit to the right so that it's at the center of the star. And now let's create a curve. I'm going to create a circle. So I'm going to go to key point curve box, and I'm going to grab the circle tool. I'm just going to, let's see, I think that should be the center. We'll have to adjust the size if necessary. Okay, so I'm just going to push it down like this so that that's the center of the tire and the wheel. And I'm just going to mark that point with the circle that we have, and I'm just going to copy and paste Just going to scale a curve like this. Now, it's not always going to be perfect. Depending on the car and depending on the motion, you might have a little bit more room here. But at least for this one, I think it looks pretty close. Okay, so in order to depict, first of all, let me just move to, well, actually, what I usually like to do is I like to, because this is the beginning and the end of a curve, I usually like to point it down like this. So what you can do is you can just say rotate, and I'm going to, because it needs to rotate about the y-axis, I like to enter 0 for x and 90 for y, and just points down like this. Now, this may or may not matter because I do need to create a curve for this one. So in this case, I don't think it really matters. It just depends on the vehicle. Okay, so now let's go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste again, and I'm just going to scale up so that we can find a curve that fits the outside one. Okay, so I don't know if this is because it's a stylized or if it's supposed to be like this, but I see that it's a little bit thinner here. I think it might be a good idea to check the actual car. So let's see. Well, to be honest, I don't have a dead side view, so it's kind of hard to see, but at least from my perspective, I think that looks pretty similar. I mean, with the wheel flats, you usually want to make it similar, so I think I'm just going to leave it like that. However, what I can do is I can just shift everything a little bit forward, but you know what, let's just leave it like this. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is you'll see that while this is pretty round at the top, it does not match over here. So in this case, what you want to do is you just want to, well, actually before I do that, let me just delete all the guidelines. So I'm going to say delete guidelines. Okay, so that's good. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a curve here somewhere, as you want to snap it somewhere, a point where it starts to splay open, and you want to go a little bit above. So I'm just going to place it over here, and I'm just going to drag the curve down like this, and I'm going to align over here, and I'm going to say G2, and I'm just going to use this curve or use this CV to pull it up like this so that it matches. Now, I don't like the relationship of the CV structure over here. I think the bottom one is a little bit too far from the second one. I feel like the spacing is a little bit uneven. So what I can do is I can just pull it up a little bit more, and I'll just drag it down like this so that the spacing is a little bit more, I guess, regulated. Okay, so I think that's good. It goes a little bit beyond, but overall not too bad. And what I like to do is I like to copy and paste it over to the other side. So let's grab this one. I'm going to move the pivot here. I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to snap it right here. I'm just going to rotate it. So in order to rotate this, what you want to do is go 0, 0, 180 so that it flips to the other side. Unfortunately, I think the shape is a little bit different between the front and the rear, which is fine. It's just going to need a little bit more refinement. So what in this case, what I want to do is I just want to align it over here, and in this case, I'm going to just push it down a little bit more so that it creates a nice shape that follows the profile of the wheel flat. Okay, so far so good. Okay, actually I don't need this one, so I'm going to delete that. And now what you want to do is you want to make sure to grab these curves and delete the construction history. Because of align, any changes that you make to this curve, that is going to mess it up. So I'm just going to delete the construction history like that. And now let's go ahead and pull this up like this. And I'm going to extend and pull it up right here like this using CV snap, or yes, control and CV snap. Okay, so everything looks pretty good over here, and now we are going to attach the curves. The problem is because it is segmented into 3 sections, even though it's following the shape of the wheel flat, it's kind of difficult to work with. So in this case, what you want to do is you want to use attach, and you want to make sure that it is set to connect. So I'm just going to connect over here, this curve over here, and this curve over here. And now what I can do is I can project this shape onto this surface like this. Basically, this is going to serve as the shape for a basis for the actual curves that we're going to make. Now, this one, I don't know why it's over here, but let's just move that first. And all these curves, I am going to just shift them inward so that it's a little bit easier to work with here. Okay. Now, the only problem is if I were to duplicate this curve, you'll see that it's got 2 degree and 32 spans, which is too much data. So in this case, what you want to do is simplify it a little bit. So what I like to do is I would like to use a fit curve, and I'm going to use a degree 6 because degree 6 is the curve degree that we used it for. So I'm just going to do a fit curve like this. It's going to take some time to crunch. Okay. Initially, that looks terrible, to be honest. It's got a CV structure, but it's a very random and very jagged. So what you want to do is, in this case, add a span. Usually that settles things down, but in this case, I don't think it's, to be honest, helping that much. Now, if this is the case, let me try doing something else. Now, I am going to just create a draft surface right here, like this. And let's see how many degrees that it has. Okay, so it's got a lot. It's got 5 degrees and 14 spans, which is too much data. So what I like to do in this case, I just want to use a line like this. And blending really doesn't really matter, but for the CV structure's sake, I think I'm just going to turn that on with extra series of 1 and blend factor of 0. And you just want to make sure that it's set to position. Okay, so I am going to increase the degree to 6 like this. Actually, I don't know why it's failing position, but that's okay. I'm going to increase the position influence to max, and I'm also going to reduce the span to 1. I think the CV structure is a tiny bit better, but not that much. Okay, so because of this, I am going to increase the spans, and it's not bad, but I think it can be better. So let's grab the surface and just turn the, well, not this one. I am going to turn the CV structure on this one. Actually, before I do that, let me just hide all these. So I'm going to grab all these curves in the back and I'm going to hide them. And let's just work with this one. Okay, so the only problem with using the align tool is that while it's giving a pretty decent shape, it's much better than the other one using the fit curve. The only problem is right now it's a CV structure is a little bit off, and if I do shift the CVs, it just doesn't go back. It doesn't stay. So that it's kind of limited in its function for me to just adjust the CV structure. Okay, so looks like this probably doesn't work. So what I'm going to do is, well, I'll just keep it for now. So I'm going to say delete construction history, and I'm going to say, well, let's just put in the wheel flat layer for now. I'm probably going to get rid of it, but this is okay. So now next, I'm going to go back to fit curve, and I'm going to shift some CVs to make this a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to, well, actually, I think the canvas can be a little bit lighter. So what I'm going to do is, well, you can try adding more spans, or you can try to, well, let's try adding spans first. See what kind of results we get. Okay, 3 is actually really bad. Let's try 4. Okay, 4 is not that bad, but as you can see over here, the CV is right at the bottom. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to 2. And I'm going to try and shift the CVs a little bit to achieve a little bit better CV structure. So what you're looking for is a little bit progressive and even CV spacing. And in order to, I'm just going to start with the top one. I'm just going to shift it down until like the CV structure over here is good. and you'll see that it's this level is a little bit different. So I'm going to just use the right mouse button and just make sure that it's similar over here. And the worst thing about this CV structure here is that it's actually doing a zigzag, so it's going in and out. You do not want that. So I'm just going to pull these down so that these can come out a little bit like that. And actually that's looking much better. And while the spacing here is a little bit big, the overall, I think the structure is a lot better than before. Okay, so I might do a little bit more. Now, I know that it has a little bit of, well, actually 1.7 is actually quite a huge deviation. But overall, it's a 1 mil out of a card that is 5,000, almost 4,500 mils long. And I like the CV structure over here, so I'm just going to make sure that this is somewhat parallel. Okay, so I think I am actually going to call that pretty good. So what you want to do is you want progressive CV structure so that it's, let's say it starts from thin, the spacing between the CV is a little bit small and goes a little bit wider. Just want to make sure that it's progressive and it's not it's not short, large. So you just want to make sure that it looks nice. Okay, so I think that actually looks pretty decent. So I'm just going to delete the construction history over here. And for this one, I think I am going to use an offset. So I'm just going to do an offset, and I just want to make sure that I turn NUV mode on. And let's try this one. Now this is a little bit different than the usual technique I use, in which case I just scale it up. Actually, you know what? Why don't I just use scale? I don't know why I'm even consider using offset. Okay, so I'm just going to, let's see, I'm going to move the pivot over here. I'm going to turn everything off. I'll say copy and paste, and I'm just going to scale it up like this. And I would say that looks pretty close. So I would say that's good enough. Now I know it's a little bit off, but I should be okay. Oh, that's why they're new scale. Okay, so the problem is because the pivot's over here, you'll see that it created a curve over here. That's not good. So what I want to do actually, before I do that, okay, so looks like our fit curve failed a little. Well, why is the CV structure like this? So if you look at the CV structure over here, you'll see that it's actually coming out. You don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab this curve, the fit curve that we made, and I'm going to see if I can just shift it a little bit. So let's delete the construction history first. Now, one of the reasons why I like to use a sheet is that so these kind of things don't happen, but I think I probably need to do a little bit of manual adjustment. So I'm going to hide these surfaces over here. I'm actually going to delete this for a second. And what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that this CV doesn't go in. So I'm just going to puff it up like this, and I'm going to just pull this back. Now, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you are only moving in Y, because you don't want to create a deviation from the side view. Okay, so I think that looks a little bit better. So you just want to make sure that this is matching nicely against the canvas. So let's just make sure that those are shifted a little bit more outboard, and I'm just going to shift this a little bit more inboard so that while it matches the shape, just also want to make sure that the CV structure is good, because right now we want to give it a little bit crown this way. So if it's negative, that is not going to give us the kind of result that we want. Okay, so that looks much better from the side view. I think it looks much better. So now let's go ahead, and I'm going to actually move the pivot over here. Well, I'm going to move the pivot over here like this, And let's go ahead. I'm going to scale. Now, when you move the pivot here like this, so you don't want to do curve snap. You want, if you do a curve snap, you want to make sure that you use the right mouse button to snap, so that the pivot only moves in the y-axis. Okay, so you want to just move it over here. Actually, I would say probably at the center, somewhere here like this. And I'm just going to use a scale to make sure that we get the outside one like this. And I think that actually looks pretty good. Okay, so now let's use a skin or a freeform blend. Actually, for the wheel flat, I always like to use skin because it matches the parameterization of the curves a bit better. Okay, so I'm just going to do a skin between the two. And for the, I do want it to give it a little bit crown. So I'm going to say crown mode proportion, crown value. I am going to just do one tick. 0.005. Often that is enough to just give it enough shape. Well, also this would also depend on engineering criteria if you have one. So sometimes the minimum crown would be 1%. So it'll just depend on also the criteria, engineering criteria, and also what kind of amount of crown that you want to give. Okay, so I think that looks good. Let's just make sure. Yes, we got a nice crown, and I think the shape looks pretty good, nice and flat. Overall, not too bad. Okay, so now that is done, let's move on to the rear. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab all the basic main ingredients back to that side. So I'm going to, well, probably this one I probably need to trim, but let's grab this one. I'm going to, let's see. Actually, before I do that, let me just delete some of these junk surfaces. And these curves I'm actually going to delete because they're no longer needed. And if I want to duplicate, if I want those curves again, I can always duplicate it. So it doesn't really matter. So let's do that. And now I'm going to grab this curve. Actually, before I do that, let me just check the shape from the top. I'll just check it against the canvas. Actually, that looks pretty good. So not too bad over there. Okay, so again, I'm going to grab this curve. And I'm also going to grab these ones over here, this one over here, and this one probably is unnecessary. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste, Control C, Control V, and I'm just going to shift them to the right towards the rear wheel flat. So I think that's the center. I think the center of the tire is actually the same. However, it looks like the shape is a little bit different, which is fine. It just means that I have to redo them. Okay, so same thing over here. I am going to use a rail, but this time let's shift it a little bit. So I am going to move the pivot over here. I'm just going to pull it down like this, and I'm going to use a stretch tool to push this side up like that. And I just want to make sure that it is close to the edge, and I think I can do a little bit more. Okay, like this. I'm just going to use the stretch tool over here, like this. Okay, so that looks good. All right, so next up, I am going to copy and paste this one, and I'm just going to scale up like this so that it matches the inside portion, which looks good. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing that we did on the front side, which is grab a curve, degree 2 curve. I'm just going to snap it like that, and I'm going to align. Okay, so blending will be turned off. It's going to be just G2. And I just want to shift this CV over here so that it sort of matches the shape. Oops. Let me just go back. Okay, so I'm going to extend it just a little bit more. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And like the front side, I am going to just extend the curve over here. I'm going to copy and paste this one, move the pivot here. I'm just going to snap it over here like this, and I'm going to rotate it. So again, it's going to be 0, 0, 180. Okay, so that looks good, and I'm just going to do the align again. Now this one is a little bit looks like we need to push it a little bit more inboard, so let's just grab this one and I'm just going to drag it down like this so that's nice and fitting like that. Okay, so everything looks good, and again you want to make sure to delete the construction history. Okay, so that looks good. And now I'm going to just extend this piece over here. Let me just make sure okay, so it looks like in this one, the end is here. Doesn't really matter because this end is actually below this point. So let's go ahead and grab extend. I'm going to snap on over here. And I'm going to snap this edge over here like that. Okay, so it looks like it's a little bit off center, but that's okay. We're going to be using fit curve anyways, so hopefully that'll resolve. Actually, you know what? Because this one is a little bit different, let's try rotating it and see if that makes a difference. So I'm going to just rotate it 90 degrees like that, and I'm going to snap a curve over here. I'm going to snap a curve over here. Oh, that does make a difference. So, okay. In the previous one, you might have noticed that the CV structures was a little bit off, but in this case, it looks like rotating it actually makes the CV structure a little bit more even. That actually might help us with the fit curve. Hopefully it does. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to align this curve over here again, just to make sure that it's actually G2. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. And now I'm going to attach with connect. So I'm going to attach this piece over here. And I'm going to attach this piece over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to project onto this surface over here. Okay, so all of these are no longer needed. So I'm going to say wheel flat. I'm just going to put it in the layer like that. And let's go ahead and do a fit curve over here. So again, I'm going to stick with 6.2. Seems like it's a pretty good value, except the CV structure is a little bit off. Okay, so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab this wheel flat over here. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to grab the whole thing. I'm just going to duplicate the curve and push it onto this side so that I have some guide as to the sizing. Now, the only problem is I don't think having the CV structure, cleaning it up, make sure the circle was at the center, helped with actually determine with the CV structure of this one. So unfortunately, looks like it's going to be a lot of shifting over here. So I'm going to grab these CVs and just bring them down. And I'm going to see if I can just keep the level the same. Sometimes it resets the fit curve. So I'm going to just wait a bit. Actually, before I continue, I am going to save. So that if it blows up, at least I can recover to some degree. Now this one, the height is a little bit off, so I'm going to try and match it like this, just using my right mouse control and my right mouse button to CV snap. And this one, I'm going to just, okay, so I think that's height is pretty good. And let's go ahead and shift these down so that the location is similar. Oh, it's gonna reset again. I don't know what determines the reset point, but sometimes it does. So let's just shift it down like this. And this CV, I'm going to just shift it down like that. And let's go ahead and move it down. Okay, and the shape is not too bad. I'm just going, now that the CV, like this, at least the spacing is even, I'm going to see if I can just adjust these. And it looks like this one is a little bit higher. Oh no. Okay, so it looks like it's gonna reset again. That's really annoying. Okay. I don't know why this moved on. This one moved up, but okay. So again, let's try that again until I can get it right. So I'm going to shift these down like this, and I'm going to make sure that this is level, and I'm going to just shift it down again. Okay, so now it's pretty close. Hopefully when I move this, it doesn't reset. Okay, so I would say that's good enough. Okay, let's move this back up. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. Let's just check the deviation. I don't know why it's off, but just in case, I am going to delete the construction history on this because I don't want it to reset. So in order to check the deviation, what you want to do is you want to use a tool called curve to curve. That's going to measure the distance between the curve and surface and the curve, and it looks like this one's a little bit tighter than the front one. So that's pretty good. Okay, so I like the spacing is actually, I wish this was a little bit more gradual, but it's not bad. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hide this in the wheel flat layer, and I'm going to give it a one more go. So let's grab fit curve again. It's going to be 6 and 2. 6 degrees to 2 spans, and let's see. Okay, so let's go ahead and basically line up the height a little bit better. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. And let's just pull these down, pull these down. Okay, so I think that's a bit better. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's do this. Okay, so that's a little bit better. I'm going to pull this up. Okay, so that's a little bit more progressive. The only problem is I think this one's a little bit inboard. So let's see if it is. So if I snap a curve here and here, you'll see that this CV structure is actually inside of this line, which is not good. So in this case, what you want to do is you want to either push these up like this, or push this one down like this. That usually solves it, but it looks like in this case it doesn't. So let's push it up a little bit more, and let's just push this one up a little bit more like that. And I think that's a bit better. Now what I could do is, well, now it's outside, which is not too bad. Now this one is definitely outside. What I can do is I can just locally try to push this out, but the problem is that sometimes reduces, that doesn't really fits the curve. So I would use that as the last resort. Okay, so let me just pull these up a little bit. Okay, so I think this, well, actually the CV structure is not that different from before. I was hoping to get a little bit more gradual spacing between all the CVs. It looks like this side is making a little bit more difficult than that. Okay, actually it's going out. In this case, so let's try putting the center pivot. Oh, that's going to reset the tool. Okay, so let's wait a bit. All right, so that reset the shape, and I'm going to make sure that these are somewhat aligned. And I'm going to pull this one down. Oh, that's going to reset it again. This, I wish Alias would fix this, but looks like it's happening again. Okay, so let's give it a one more go. Now, the wheel flat is very important, so you want to make sure that you get this right, because everything is going to connect to it. So it's one of the more critical piece of surface that you are going to make. Okay, so it doesn't look too bad. The spacing is good, but I feel like this is a little bit, well, you know what? Let's call this done. I think it looks pretty good. It is a little bit close, but at least it's not going in. Spacing is a little bit better than before. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy and paste. I'm going to put it here. And I'm just going to see if I can make this a little bit flat. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to snap a curve from here to here. It's still outboard, it barely. So I would say this is the one to keep. Okay, so I'm happy with it. I'm just going to delete the construction history and all the other curves that were here. Actually, I don't know which one I'm supposed to. Looks like it's fit curve 3, or is it? Okay, so fit curve 2. I'm pretty sure it's fit curve 3 that we need. So the other two. Actually, you know what? I copied and pasted. Oh yeah, so I think it should be 2. Okay, so I'm just going to delete everything else. And I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to just move the pivot here like this. And I'm going to copy and paste. Oh, actually, before I copy and paste, let's just make sure that the structure is good. So I'm going to move that into a default layer, and I'm going to hide everything else, including the sheet. And I just want to make sure. Oh, actually, for the rear, I forgot to do this. Hopefully it doesn't create too much problem. Okay, so what I should have done, I should have made sure that this was... Okay, so I think I probably need to do a little bit of manual adjustment. So what I should have made sure is that the plane that we are using to create this wheel flat, I had a little bit crown that it was had a little bit inboard movement over here, but I think I forgot to do that. So what I can do is I can just move it manually. So let me just get rid of the wheel flat over here. And I'm just going to move it like this so that it's close like that. And I think just shifting it in the Y direction is enough to get it fitted. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And now I wonder why it's a little bit off. But I'm not going to touch that. I'm just going to leave it as is. And now I do need to scale it up. So let's go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste. Control C, Control V. And I just want to make sure that the pivot is at the right direction, right location, which it isn't right now. So I'm just going to move up the pivot here. And let's just check it from the rear view. I want to probably something at the center like this, and I'm just going to scale it like that, and there's the wheel flat for the rear. Now I know it's not matching perfectly for the either the front or the rear, but usually you want to keep it parallel, so I think I'm just going to do that. And I do feel like the orthographic drawing is a little bit stylized, so I think I'm just going to try to best fit this. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. Let me just hide everything else and let's just do a skin over here. Okay, so let's see if this is good. The highlight is nice. From the front, it looks pretty nice and flat, so I think that looks pretty good. All right. Okay, so I don't need the curves anymore, so you can either delete or shift them into the wheel flat layer, and you can delete the construction history, and the wheel flat is done. Okay, so that is it for part 2. We will continue building the car in the next tutorial, and thank you guys for watching.